Welcome to the 3 Seeds Natives podcast, where we believe it takes 3 seeds to germinate great ideas.
Seeds 1 and 2 are Stephanie.
Hello, and Elizabeth.
Yo.
And seed 3 is a guest or even a plant with a story.
Let's dive into the curious and fascinating world of native plants. Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3 Seeds Natives podcast. We are with Dave Odd.
Yes.
Over here at the Montrose Wilson Park District beachside area. So, Dave,
Yes.
you are the founder of Odd Produce.
Odd Produce Inc. I was a stand-up comedian for many years, and my company for that was called Dave Odd Productions Entertainment, or DOPE. And I started doing foraging tours for the public. Just walking tours. Meet me at this park, meet me at this restaurant, we'll go walk around. In the case of the restaurants, the original concept of my Eat the Neighborhood tours was to team up with some of the restaurants I was selling produce to literally do a walk around the block that the restaurant was on, see all of the wild edible plants and things that grow in the landscaping, or even in people's gardens, backyards, whatever, right there on the block, and then return to the restaurant and have a meal made from all the things that we saw. So that was the original concept of Eat the Neighborhood, but that kind of morphed into a sort of a whatever, meet me at this spot and we'll go walk around and I'll show you 50 different edible or medicinal plants or mushrooms. Anywhere you put me, you can put me anywhere in the Chicagoland area, the Midwest, Eastern United States, and I will find you 50 things.
So that's like your guarantee.
That is my guarantee. That's kind of my gimmick with the tours.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that do foraging tours, and everyone does them in different ways, but a lot of foraging classes are very specific plant focused. Like we're going to talk about 7 plants today, or we're going to talk about this particular genus today, or whatever. And it's more like advanced. My tours are specifically designed for the casual observer, man on the street, kind of layman sort of thing, where it's just casual person, hey, crap has kind of hit the fan. I need to know some of this stuff. What can I eat in my neighborhood? And that's where I come in, literally just walk
what do you
them
mean
around.
by crap has hit the fan?
Well,
we're not making
pandemic,
ends meet.
Uncertainty in the market, and tariffs, and who knows what else is going to come down the pike.
Are you talking like end time survival skills?
Not necessarily end time survival skills, but like difficult times.
Yeah.
Hard times.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that civilization is going to collapse anytime soon, but we're probably closer than we've ever been in our lifetimes, for sure.
And also, groceries bills are sky high.
Yeah.
And if you could somehow supplant.
Right. This is a very small question. Do you, when you say you're going to show people 50 plants, do people get really competitive about that? Are they like, show me, I'm counting? Or,
no, I will designate somebody in the group to keep count.
Okay.
I'm like, hey, you got a notebook, keep a list for me, check me on this,
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll have a backup counter too, because I want to make sure we get to 50 things. And oftentimes, we just did one in Oak Park earlier today, and the counter guy said, he admitted that he missed a few, but I think we got up to 70 things.
Okay.
So.
But what I also love about that is the way you're doing it, it's about discovery.
Yeah.
It's not
it's really about the way I put it when I do the tours. I always tell people at the beginning, I'm going to show you 50 different things today. I do not expect you to remember 50 things, but if you can remember 5 or 10 of those things, that can be the difference between life or death in a survival situation. So if in 10 years from now you're in a plane crash in the wilderness of the Rocky Mountains or whatever it is, if you remember a few of these things today, that could literally keep you alive. And another thing that I focus on my tours is what I like to call the 90% rule. Which is a rule that I made up. And I don't know, I'm sure other foragers talk about it, but it's basically the principle that there are entire families and genuses of plants that have no toxic members. So as long as you can identify it as being in one of those safe families, you don't need to know exactly what species it is.
Oh, cool.
So some good examples of that would be anything in the allium family, onion family,
Love
anything
allium.
in the mint family, anything in the mustard family, anything in the rubus or blackberry raspberry family. These are all very easy to identify, even for the layman. There's even mushrooms that fit into that category, like puffballs, a lot of the polypores, like chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, even chanterelle mushrooms, oyster mushrooms. These are all typically pretty easy to identify, even for novice or inexperienced foragers.
And so how did you actually come to foraging? Did you go to school for this?
No,
or?
Since I was a kid, I was very interested in nature. I grew up in Skokie, a couple blocks away from a little nature park called Emily Oaks. They had like a pond and stuff. And before it was officially a nature center, my brother would take me fishing there all the time, and I'd go off and catch frogs and turtles, and I'd bring home like turtles and tadpoles for the summer and watch them transform and grow up, and then re-release them in the fall or whatever. And caterpillars, I loved collecting the monarchs and like raising them up and watching them transform and all that kind of stuff. And this was before all of that stuff was kind of like in the zeitgeist of like helping nature and whatnot. So it was just something I loved. And then when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, my mom noticed I had taken an interest in cooking, so she started teaching me how to cook. And at that same time, I was going to summer camp at that same nature park that I grew up at. And one of the camp counselors started being like, hey, you can pick these mulberries, eat these mulberries, you can chew on these grapevines here. And I'm like, oh, cool. I
chew on these grapevines?
Yeah, you can chew on grapevines, and they're like really tart and sour.
Oh, I was like,
really
maybe
nice.
that's just how to keep a kid busy.
But it was essentially, it was like this melding of two things that I really enjoyed that came together in my brain. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I like cooking. I like nature, and I can cook nature, and that's really neat. And it just became kind of a lifelong obsession of mine. I remember I was 13 years old, and I was walking around with my friend Ovi, who had a pet parakeet, and we would go around and collect seeds for the parakeet. So I was even foraging for animals and stuff. Cool. And then I became a stand-up comedian when I was in my early 20s. I did that for 15 years. And I was producing shows, I was running comedy classes, I even had a comedy club at a theater for a few years. And
here in Chicago?
Yeah. And there were some times where times were tight. And I would actually have to go out and collect stuff to make like my meals, like pad out my meals and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of foraged not only as a hobby, but sometimes for literal survival. Mm-hmm. And in 2009, I started seeing a new girl, and we went on some nature hikes. We were at Turkey Run State Park in Indiana.
That's a cool place.
Yeah, we found some chanterelles growing on the side of the trail. And I wasn't 100% confident in I knew they were chanterelles, but I wasn't 100% sure, so I went on my flip phone and paid like $1.49 for internet access or whatever it was at the time to make sure they were chanterelles. And then we roasted them on the side of the trail on branches and with some beef jerky. And we ate them, and it was like this really fun, cool thing. And I'm like, this is what we can do. This could be our thing. We can go mushroom hunting.
Beef jerky with everything.
Yeah,
really.
babe, let's do this.
So we started going out mushroom hunting. Whenever we had free time, we would go mushroom hunting. And after a few weeks, I'm just like, I'm so sick of eating mushrooms, like there's only so many mushrooms you can eat. So I started going to the farmer's market with all the chanterelles and stuff I was finding, and the guy at River Valley Ranch was buying mushrooms from me, like straight up.
Wow.
I
know that.
I think the first time I walked up with like 3 pounds of chanterelles, and I'm like, hey, do you guys buy mushrooms? And he's like, yeah, these are really nice. Here's $30. Or it was like, I think you give me $20 a pound, like $60.
Wow.
And I was like, cool, all right.
Right.
So I started going out mushroom hunting, and any of the extras I would bring to them at River Valley Ranch, and they would buy them from me. And then the fall rolled around, and you have Hen of the Woods here in Chicago. That was a particularly good year for them, where you're literally finding 20, 30 of these mushrooms a day. And they weigh an average of like 8 pounds each. So I'm literally getting garbage bags full of Hen of the Woods, and I'm hauling them over my shoulder like Santa Claus and bringing them to his table. And he's like, all right, that's too many mushrooms.
We've tapped. Yeah.
And
so you're like, oh.
At a certain point, one of
people.
his employees was like, you should just go talk to some restaurants, So at the time, in my house, I had one of those, do you remember those? They were like a deck of cards, and it was kind of like those old coupon books that you would sell as a fundraiser, but it was like a deck of cards, but for restaurants. Oh. And each card was a coupon for a different restaurant. And it had the names and the description of the restaurant on there. So I started flipping through those cards, and any restaurant that said farm to table, locally sourced, I would call them. And I'd be like, hey, do you guys want some locally sourced mushrooms? And the first restaurant I called was Bon Soiree. Bon Soiree, which was Shin Thompson's place. He owned all those the ramen shops that popped up for a while there. I forget what they were called. But anyway, Furious Noodle or Furious Ramen.
Furious Spoon.
Furious Spoon, that's it. So he owned all those shops. But before that, he owned Bon Soiree, which is now Table Donkey Stick, which is the
Oh,
most...
yeah, I've eaten there.
It's a terrible name for a restaurant.
It's a
I know
weird
it's named after an old fable or something. I always told them, hey, buddy, I'm going to start a restaurant right across the street called Horse Table Branch or whatever.
Horse chair.
Yeah. So anyway, I started bringing them to him, and he was going bonkers over them. But it was a small restaurant, so he can only buy like 5-10 pounds at a time. And he's like, hey, you should go talk to Rob Levitt at Motto down the street. And then he was like, oh, you should go talk to my old sous chef at this place. And then that guy would
And you
be
were
like,
just
you got to talk to...
dragging your garbage back
Yeah.
from place to
And what happened was I wound up finishing out that season selling to like, 10, 15 different restaurants when this was just like a side project of mine. And then winter came along and I just kind of went back to my comedy thing, and focused on that. And then in the spring, people started calling me and they're like, hey, do you have ramps? Do you have nettles? Do you have this? Do you have that? And I'm like, okay. All right, we got something here. Like, because doing stand-up comedy, if you want to get like a booked at a comedy club, you have to get recommendations, you have to go do, auditions, you have to send in a tape, you have to send a bunch of emails, you have to keep following up with them. And then if you're lucky, you might get a weekend in Louisville, Kentucky for $500 or whatever. And then you're stuck in some town you've never been and don't have any friends at. Or I can go out to my friend's property who I just knocked on her door one day and I said, can I pick these ramps in your yard? And she's like, what are ramps? And I'm like, these wild onions that grow all over your lawn. She's like, oh, that's why the lawn smells weird when we mow it. But yeah, that's fine. I don't grow them or anything. They just grow here naturally. So we would go to her house. I'd go bring 6 or 7 friends or chefs or whoever with me. And we'd pick like 300, 400, 500 pounds of ramps a week for the season. And we did it in a way that was actually sustainable. We've been going to that same place for 15
Can you please
years.
sidebar and tell us how do you pick ramps sustainably? Somebody wants to know.
Okay. So, we've been basically going there for 15 years and you can't even tell we were there. So this is the way you do it. You got to find very dense patches. And I swear, like this spot, when we first started going, it was like you could not walk through the woods without stepping on ramps. It was a carpet of them. It had been there for hundreds of years untouched. And it was like just this little 20-acre plot of private land that had never been developed outside of the houses that were on it. Kind of like rolling hills and streams and stuff in northwest Indiana. With ramps, you have to find a patch like that that's just so dense that it's almost choking itself out. And what you do is you have to pick a cluster that's big enough to like make it worthwhile digging up that cluster, but also not too big that it's going to be like the bulbs are all going to be interlocked and really hard to like get the root ball out.
You're digging out the whole plant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would find a cluster, pop out, use the shovel, pop out that cluster and pull it out, knock off all the dirt, fill the hole back in, and then move 2 or 3 feet over and do it again to another cluster. And then just in concentric circles around that spot, every 3 or 4 feet, you pick another one. And eventually you get a big pile of them. And while you're doing that, because the population is so dense, all you're really doing is you're opening up these little pockets where new growth can come in. The problem with ramps, you can easily destroy the entire population if you're not doing it right. Because the seed of a ramp is like a little tiny BB. It's like a little black BB. And it's so hard that it takes 2 or 3 years just for it to break down enough for it to germinate. And then it takes another 3 to 4 years to become a mature plant to reproduce on its own. So it's like a 6 to 7 year life cycle, which is why nobody can grow them reliably. And they have to grow in the woods, and they're very seasonal. Nowadays, if I'm picking them for myself, I'll just pick 1 or 2 leaves per plant. So
Okay. Well, thank you. That satisfies my curiosity in many ways.
And you might have heard that Chicago is actually named after the ramp.
I didn't know it was
Native
named after the
American
ramp,
word
Stinky
Chihuahua
onion.
is the derivative of where Chicago came from. Chihuahua was a Native American word that they used to describe the area of Chicago. Native Americans would often name areas they went to after the plants that grew there. So when they walked through the meadows and the fields and the woods of Chicago, they would smell onions, especially in the spring, because there's so many different species of onions that grow here and kick up these onion smells. So Chicago roughly translate to like skunk smell or stinky onion smell, and that's how Chicago supposedly got its name.
That kind of brings me to my thought about foraging, is the question, how recently did we lose our knowledge of foraging? Historically, most people have been foraging forever, except up until like when?
I would think that if you talk to anyone whose family lineage has been here in the United States for longer than a couple hundred years, they would probably say, oh, my great-grandmother or my grandmother used to forage for mushrooms or whatever, and kind of taught me about it. They say a lot of people from the old world, especially Asian countries and Eastern European countries, they say if you really want to learn mushroom hunting, you're supposed to go out with like some old like grandfather from, Lithuania or Russia or something like that, because in parts of Soviet Russia, when they didn't, in the wintertime, they had to literally go out and hunt for food to not die. And so a lot of those people know a lot of the mushrooms that you can eat. And a lot of the North American species are almost identical to the European species, if not exactly genetically identical. I think that most modern Americans that are first, second, third generation, depending on where their family came from, lost their knowledge as soon as grocery stores became
That's what
a
I
thing,
would assume, yeah.
Because the first grocery store was a Piggly Wiggly, opened up in 1920. And
Are you serious?
That was the first legitimate grocery store.
Chain.
Before then,
No?
we didn't really have grocery stores.
Well, there were grocers.
There were grocers, there were general stores, there were
Yes.
things like that. But these were places that just basically got locally sourced, seasonal items. So it was like going to a farmer's market. It wasn't like you can in 1900 you couldn't just go to a one-stop shop to make a pie or build your own pizza or whatever. It was like you had to be there at the right time, at the right place to get all the ingredients you would need or grow things yourself. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like you could just go to the store and get some bread and or some flour and yeast and eggs and all the things you need to make whatever you want. And people are so spoiled these days because anyone can just go to the grocery store and get whatever the hell they want whenever they want, even at midnight.
Well, okay, spoiled, yes, count that. Unfortunately, I'm one of those, right?
Yeah.
But also, so many people seem, dare I say, hungry for the knowledge of foraging.
Right.
To get back to what's not that long ago, what our families knew. And
why are people interested in foraging? What are the top reasons typically?
So,
I know you mentioned earlier that hard times, but are there other reasons too?
I will say this: if you've ever grown your own food in your own backyard, grown a tomato from seed, picked that tomato and made yourself a BLT,
you're in love.
that is something where you're not only is God damn, this is good.
Right.
But also,
also
I grew this with my own hands,
Yes.
and now I'm eating it.
Yeah.
I can survive. Being able to provide for yourself and provide your own food. If you've ever gone hunting or fishing and caught your own fish and filleted it and cooked it and eaten it, it's that same kind of feeling of not to quote Tim Allen, this primal, tapping into your survival instincts of our ancestors of going out and providing for yourself.
And maybe this is a more feminine take on it. For me, and my experience has been more it's calming and soothing to know that I can get my own food.
Right.
That's actually kind of reduces anxiety.
It does, but
makes sense.
I feel even for women, there's that thing in your head of yeah, I did it. I'm a survivor.
I picked these anise hyssop leaves. Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid.
Oh. Yeah.
The first time we had a garden, me and my brother brought home our little beans from the styrofoam cup from school, and we planted them in the yard. And I remember we picked a few handfuls of these green beans, and my mom cooked them for us. And me and my brother sat at the kitchen table and ate green beans. Something that we would never eat on our own. We didn't like green beans.
Yeah.
But the fact that we had grown them, we wanted to eat them. And I remember after we ate them, we high-fived. It was yes, we did it. We grew something. And it was just a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And I feel foraging is the same way of being able to literally Go out with your family into a park and pick some June berries for the day and then turn it into a pie later and like eat it and be like, damn, this is good. This is awesome that we made this.
Yeah. You did it yourself and it's freshy fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so,
it's just,
but also doesn't it, like, I'm sure you're blowing people's minds when you're foraging because you're showing people like that weed that you've been removing from your yard for the last 20 years is edible.
I honestly, I was talking about this with somebody earlier today. I think I want to develop a program to teach gardeners and farmers and stuff about those plants that kind of grow right alongside your crops that you should leave alone and let them grow, because you can use those as a, like, either for your personal use or as an added food value for when you go to the farmer's market or whatever, of like, hey, not only do I have these beautiful tomatoes, but I also have these lamb's quarters that grew right next to the tomatoes, used all the same resources I was giving to the tomatoes, but I never planted them, but now you have these leafy greens you can use on your sandwich or whatever that you're making with the tomatoes. There's one particular plant that I love seeing in my garden. It's black nightshade. And black nightshade is a really common weed. If you look it up, you're like, I've seen that. And they get these little black berries on them when they're ripe, and they taste just like a tomato. And when you look at the plant, it looks like a tomato plant because it's a nightshade, and tomatoes, of course, are nightshades. I let them grow in my garden. They grow right next. So even if I put down weed barrier and cut the little hole for the tomato plant, like one of the black nightshades will figure out a way to get in there, and they'll grow right next to the tomato. So it's like they're just kind of an extension of the tomato plant, growing right next to it, using all the same resources, but not really sapping anything from the tomato plants. Tomatoes still produce beautifully. But now I have all these little extra tiny little tomatoes that are growing wild, and because they're getting all the irrigation and the nutrients that I put out there for the other tomatoes, they grow really well. And then at the end of the season, I can collect up tons of the, like a pound or two of these little tiny, like pea-sized tomatoes that you can then use in a salad, or you can add them to a tomato salad that you're making, like if you like a little dollop of aioli with a little mini tomato on top of it or whatever. Or what I did with all the ones I had last year is I turned them into a hot sauce, and I still have that hot sauce with peppers from my garden. And it was literally just cooking down the black nightshade with a little bit of sugar, vinegar, and then adding the peppers in and blending it all together. And it's purple. It's like a purple hot sauce. It's super cool.
What percentage, just hypothetically speaking, what percentage of our diet could we get from foraged native plants?
Well, okay. When we're talking about native plants specifically, you're kind of limiting yourself. And that is because a lot of the edibles that we have here are invasive plants.
Yes.
Things like daylilies and even some species of nettles and lamb's quarters, like I just talked about. Like those, a lot of those are non-native. So
in the native camp, what would you recommend people grow for foraging?
For native plants, we were talking before the show. We were talking about anise hyssop and mints and herbs and oregano and things like that. These are really good things to grow because a lot of them are perennial, so they come back every year. You don't have to keep re-sowing them. And a lot of those things kind of do double duty as not only bringing in pollinators, but they're also useful on their own as flavoring and herbs that you can use in other things. A lot of them will keep away grazing animals like deer and rabbits, and they're just overall pretty awesome. I would highly recommend that people at least dedicate part of their garden to like perennials. Like do a perennial section of your garden that you know is going to come back every year and you don't really have to mess with.
And Dave, and listeners, we are standing under a black walnut tree.
We are standing under a black walnut tree.
And you were saying that you've actually eaten a walnut.
Yes.
From a and you were saying it had to cure.
We did a tour yesterday at Belmont Harbor, not too far from where we're standing right now, just a few miles down the lakeshore path here. And we found like a perfectly, one of the people on the tour came up to me with a walnut that was like perfectly, like a lot of times you find a walnut that's been sitting around for a few months and they're going to be cracked and they're going to be rotten and they're going to be gross. But this one was like perfect.
And how can you tell? What does it look like?
Because it was still closed, there was no holes in it, there was no like, it wasn't brown or like crusty looking or anything like that. It was just like a really nice looking walnut, almost like one you got from the grocery store. But I knew it was a black walnut, and he's like, "Hey, this is a walnut, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I threw it on the ground, on the concrete, and we cracked it open, and we were actually able to eat the nut out of it, and it was really good.
That's impressive also.
Yeah. But black walnut is, a lot of people see it as a nuisance because it does make a big mess. If you try to mess with the nuts when they're still green, they stain everything yellow. If you try to mess with them when they're ripe, they're full of worms and they're all black and gross. But there is a nut inside of there that's actually really tasty, and it doesn't taste like a commercial walnut from the grocery store. It legitimately has like a blue cheese fruitiness to it.
Wow.
That is completely unlike a grocery store walnut. It's like a totally different thing. But it's a really hard nut, like to crack, literally.
That's why you slammed it on the ground?
Yeah, because it's got this very hard shell, and then you know how a walnut looks inside like a brain, but it's interspersed with the shell itself. So it's really hard to get it out in one piece. So you have to use something like garden shears to like crack it open. There's a contraption you can get called a Grandpa's Goodie Getter. That
is that another word for nutcracker?
It's basically a nutcracker. If you think of like a citrus press with like that half dome thing that crushes, it's kind of like that, but it's like two half domes.
You crank it together.
Yeah, and you crank it, and it just kind of shatters the outer shell, just enough where you can pick apart the shell and get the nut meat out whole.
Okay.
But you need a special tool to do it properly. Otherwise, you're like hitting it with a hammer and mashing a bunch of it, and you're picking it out with like a nut pick, and it's a big pain in the butt. There are other things you can do with green walnuts. You can make nocino, which is an Italian liqueur. You would pick them around this stage, actually, right when they're about the size of like a golf ball or a ping pong ball, when they're a little bit smaller and they haven't fully matured yet. And you can quarter them or have them fill up a jar and then dump a bunch of just neutral liqueur on it, like a, or I guess a liquor, vodka or like a high proof, like Everclear or something like that. And you just submerge it. You let it sit for a while. You can dump a bunch of sugar in there too. Shake it all up. Let it sit for a few months, like 2-3 months, like in a cool, dark place. Shake it up every once in a while. And then you're gonna strain off that liquid, and then you can put aromatics in it. I prefer to just keep it as is, just so you can get the walnut like flavor in there. And then you can add a bunch of aromatics if you want, cinnamon, clove, mint, whatever you want it to taste like, and let it sit for another few months. Then you strain that off, and you wind up with this really syrupy cordial that tastes like green walnut smell. Like, you ever walk through the woods and you get that beautiful whiff of like citrusy breeze? That's from the walnuts. And to be able to capture that scent in a liquor, is pretty amazing. And you can use it as a sipping digestive thing that you would have after dinner, or you can like make cocktails with it, or you can use it as in place of a vanilla or almond extract in baking and impart that flavor into it.
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
Okay. I feel like that would be something really interesting to include in like a cookie recipe.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway,
and then if you were able to crack out actual black walnuts to add to that walnut cookie.
Oh yeah.
That
would be a funky tasting
with
cookie,
some like 72% dark chocolate chips in there.
Blue cheese.
Yeah.
I'd come to your odd produce restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do my forage and feast tours at my property, where I do all the cooking for it.
Oh,
I'm
really?
a really good cook too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're going. Question for you.
Yes.
What cracks you up about foraging?
What cracks me up about foraging?
Yes. Is there anything where you're foraging and you're like, oh my gosh, if someone saw me right now, they would think I'm insane because I'm laughing so hard by myself?
Not necessarily, but I feel like the funniest thing is how wary some people are of foraging.
Okay.
Yeah.
They just will go, like I recently was diagnosed with colon cancer, and people were saying to me like, oh, it's probably from all those wild plants you eat and stuff. And I'm like, if anything, it's probably from the Coca-Cola that I drink every day, or the hamburgers that I eat all the time. Because, yeah, I'm a forager, but I'm also a big, fat, dumb American, too, that likes junk food. It's my only real vice, and that's probably what did me in, not the foraging. If I foraged more, I'd probably be better off for it. But people are so wary of things. Like, I can literally pick an apple off of a tree in a park like we're at now and hand it to somebody, and they'll be like, oh, I don't know where that's been. It's like, can you even name the country the last apple you ate came from?
Or how about when I buy groceries and I think, I don't know where this has been
on
its path to the grocery store.
Right, because it's like,
Or at
I always tell people, like, people are always wary of, like, well, how do I know it hasn't been, like, peed on, or like a rat or a dog, or like, you know, pesticides and runoff, and
Or
it's
a
like,
bat peed on
first
it.
of all, you live in Chicago. You're already full of all of that stuff, and then on top of that, like, you don't like the stuff, like, compared to the things they intentionally put on your food in the grocery store, like, dog pee's not going to kill you. Just give it a wash. You'll be fine, you know?
Yeah.
But
That's foraging 101 right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would just say, you know, just clean your stuff good and you're fine.
Yeah, that should be your tagline.
Yeah.
Just clean your stuff good. So when you think about all of the things that you have foraged over many years of foraging now, what's like one of the things that really sticks out as like maybe one of the rarest or most exciting finds?
My favorite fruit to forage, probably June berries. June berries or service berries are something you can find growing in just about every corner of Chicago.
Really?
It's a native tree, but you barely ever see it. I've only ever seen it in the wild in like very like rough wilderness areas, like on limestone cliffs in southern Illinois, like that kind of thing. They grow them in landscaping pretty much everywhere. They were like 10, 15 years ago, they were like a favorite of like city planners and stuff. So Home Depot parking lots and bank parking lots and like parks and neighborhoods and like the front of like office buildings and apartment buildings and things like that. These are trees that are very easy to identify. They have a really pretty spring flower. They have a really pretty fall color, and the berries feed the birds without making a mess. And so that's why they were so popular for so long. And these are things you can find just about anywhere. And they produce these beautiful, juicy blueberry-like berries in June, usually. And you can collect up tons of them and use them just like you would in any recipe with blueberries. They're super easy to use. They also contain a lot of pectin, which is the starch that sets up a jelly or a jam. And they're really good companion fruit for making like black raspberries or mulberries and other things that are ripe at that same time that don't have any pectin in them. So like doing a 50-50 blend, you can make a really nice jam. They do have a little edible seed inside of them too that tastes like almond or amaretto. So when you do make a jam with it, you can kind of blend up the whole thing to like infuse that flavor throughout, and you get this beautiful blueberry-like jam which has some apple and cranberry notes as well as that amaretto on top. It's legitimately like having a smoothie in your mouth when you have a handful of these things.
And I guess the thing that scares me about foraging a little bit is will I get arrested?
Officially, you're not supposed to pick anything in the Chicago parks, but there's plenty of other places you can find in Chicago to pick stuff, to find things that are like legally allowed, you're legally allowed to pick. Generally speaking, if you're not being a complete asshole about it and like uprooting stuff and shoving it in a garbage bag, I don't think like the most you're gonna get is like, hey, you can't do that.
But where were you garbage bagging mushrooms?
Honestly, a lot of it was from, I would drive around on the North Shore. This is like literally on people's like lawns and in the parks and stuff.
At night?
At night?
No,
under
this
the
was
cover
just
of
like,
fog?
this was literally just like in the day, like I'm driving around in Highland Park and just finding hen of the woods growing on people's lawns and stuff.
I know, but then you're going on their lawn? That's cool?
Well, like
Walk me through that.
the street side of the street side of the sidewalk kind of thing.
Oh, I see.
That and like some of the little parks and stuff that they have right by the lake, they were
Yeah.
just like growing right there on the trees. Cemeteries, amazing. Cemeteries are amazing for mushroom hunting, especially these very old cemeteries with big old mature oaks, because those big old mature oaks in the mowed lawn mimics what the habitat of Chicago was before it was settled, because it was prairie and oak savanna, and oak savanna is essentially a prairie with sparse oak growth. And so head of the woods, chicken of the woods, puffballs, these are all big showy mushrooms that you can find in the late summer and fall. And if you're driving around a place with big old mature oak trees and mowed lawn, you can see them from your car.
Yeah.
So you can literally just drive around and find them. Also, if you really want to go foraging like legally, especially for mushrooms, berries, fruits, nuts, state parks are legally, you are legally allowed to pick those things in those parks. So anything under the jurisdiction of the Department of Natural Resources, like fish and wildlife areas, things like that, I'm pretty sure Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin.
I feel like the cicadas are like, yeah.
Yeah. Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, I think all have that kind of open rule. You've got to check your local rules and regulations, of course, but generally speaking, state parks, Department of Natural Resources are open for mushrooms, berries, fruits, nuts for personal use. You can go to Starved Rock with your family for the day, find a chicken of the woods, carry it around with you, shove it in the face of a park ranger and be like, look what I got. And they can't tell you no. As long as they're not selling them or anything like that, if you're using them for personal use, perfectly legal to do so. And then I also recommend getting out into the country, drive south of the city or north of the city, get out on 394 and kind of get off on those farm roads and stuff. And that kind of margin between the ditch and the road, or just over the ditch, a 15-foot wide berth from the road is kind of fair game. And if you're not right on the side of a busy highway and stuff, you don't really have to worry about as much runoff on these lower traveled country roads. So things like wild asparagus can be found, stinging nettles can be found. You can find things like the walnut trees, mulberry trees, all that kind of stuff just growing right alongside the road. And oftentimes it's just bordered by a farm field or something like that. That's usually corporate owned or whatever, and nobody gives a crap. And then there's woodlands and stuff you can drive through, and you can find mushrooms right off the side of the road. And there's a lot of places you can go that are kind of in that no man's land sort of public-private in-between space. In Chicago, I would oftentimes go through alleys on the north side or even in the suburbs where people have backyard gardens, and then a bunch of stuff kind of goes feral from the garden out into the alley.
Yeah, actually, shout out to Sonia and David, who gave me alley rhubarb last year.
Nice.
Yeah.
But so I have a kind of maybe going a little bit deeper for you. What role does foraging now play in your life? You were a stand-up comedian. You kind of happened across this as something you could do. Now you're sharing your knowledge with others. Where do you see this headed?
I see this as my retirement plan. I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. For as long as I'm able to walk and breathe and move around, I'm going to be teaching people how to live off the land. Because my ultimate goal is to teach as many people as possible. One of the first things I tell people when they come to my tour, I always ask, has anyone here done any kind of foraging before? And, probably about 70-80% of the people raise their hands and say, I've never done foraging before. But most of them, maybe there's 30% or 20% that have done some kind of foraging before, but most of them haven't. And I'll say, well, this is going to be a life-changing experience for you today. And it doesn't really have anything to do with me specifically. It's just that once you are open to this stuff and you are told about it and you remember that, it's going to stand out to you. Once you learn how to identify a black walnut tree or a Juneberry tree, for the rest of your life, you're going to see it. It's going to stand out to you. It's like when you get a new car and then you see that car everywhere for the rest of your life.
It was just last weekend, I was walking by some lilies and I pointed out to the people I was walking with, that's edible, that one's poisonous, and it's thanks to you, seeing you from a video long time ago, many years ago.
Yeah.
It's that tastes like a green bean, that'll hurt you.
Right. Exactly. And it's one of those things that literally does stick with you, and you will remember it. It's if you're into Pokemon cards or Star Wars stuff or whatever, if you see somebody walking down the street wearing a Pokemon or a Star Wars shirt, you're going to notice it. And you're going to be hey, that's the thing I like. And so my goal is to instill that in everyone that I come across, that everyone that comes to my tours. My favorite thing is when you can tell that somebody has been kind of dragged along on the tour, like a kid, or like a 10-year-old kid, or like a boyfriend or something, somebody who clearly that wasn't their top thing to do that day, and they'll just kind of be texting on their phone or whatever and walking along all day. But then at the end of the day, I see them kind of be oh yeah, there's that chicken of the woods, or there's that, there's that mushroom again, or hey, look what I found, and it's you weren't paying attention the whole time.
And I think it feels good to have a certain level of competency around what you're seeing around you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just this week,
you feel more connected if you see something, you recognize it, you feel
for instance, one of my general tours, I did a tour yesterday for I think 9 people, I did a tour today for 12 people, and that's 20 people for the weekend that are going to just remember a few things that I told them for the rest of their life. And if I can multiply that times 100 a year, that's awesome to me.
So the vision for you is that there are just multitudes of people who know more about what their options are and what they're seeing.
Yeah.
That's like success for you. Like you've arrived.
Yeah, just being able to like share my knowledge with people. It's something I've always. My first business was called Reptorama, and I did reptile shows for kids' birthday parties. Because I kept a bunch of reptiles and I knew everything about them, and I loved reptiles, and I wanted to share that with other people. So I did reptile shows for kids' birthday parties and stuff.
What was it called?
Reptorama.
Reptorama.
Yeah.
Well, this has got me pretty jazzed to walk around with you and find stuff.
Let's do that. I see something on the lawn over there. You see that white thing on the lawn?
I see something, yeah.
It might be a piece of trash, but it might be a mushroom. We're going to go walk over and look at that. I don't think it's a mushroom, but okay, this is a Kentucky coffee tree, which is a really common street planted tree in Chicago. It is also a native tree, and it creates these big fat pods that have these large bean-like seeds in it. And there is, there they are. The green ones.
Those are big ones.
Alexis Nelson, Black Forager, she has a recipe that she turns these, she kind of uses them like chickpeas and turns them into like a falafel type thing.
Oh, really?
Or hummus, and you can do that with them. There is some like toxic alkaloids in them, so you have to treat them a specific way and like cook them in a couple changes of water, and you have to like peel them like lima beans, and you kind of have to cook the crap out of them to really process them. And then the dried beans can actually be roasted and turned into like a coffee-like drink. They used it in the Civil War. Let's talk about the hackberry. This is an American hackberry. This is another really common, not only a wild tree, but also commonly planted in landscaping. And it has these little berries on it. They're about the size of a pea or so. When they are ripe, they're going to be brownish purple, or they're going to be purple, like a darkish purple. It really depends. It's basically just one big seed covered in a very thin layer of flesh. You can see there's a seed in there. So it's more of like just a nibble thing, but the flesh when they're ripe tastes like dates or figs. So it's got this really nice like sweet flavor. If you collect up enough of them, you can blend them with some water in like a food processor or a blender and turn them into a nut milk that you can then...
Oh, so the seed is edible as well.
You just have to strain out the little seed bits. And it supposedly tastes just like a figgy nut milk. It does kind of have the same properties as prune juice.
I mean, figgy nut milk.
I would buy that.
I know. I'm coming over. I hope you know that. What time's dinner?
I actually made stuff.
Dinner's in like 3 days because we have to do all this processing of it.
Yesterday I made food for the news people.
Oh, you did?
I gave them, I made them a chanterelle cream sauce with chanterelles and tomatoes from my garden and stuff.
Wow.
Over rice. It was really good. And then I also did a wild strawberry like pound cake thing for them. These little Entenmann's pound cakes, and put the wild strawberry jam on it with some whipped cream. They ate like most of it on air. This is a hawthorn. And hawthorn's a pretty wide-ranging plant. In the United States, they're mostly grown as ornamentals, but they do put off this berry. And you see the 5-petaled crown on there. If you find a fruit with this 5-petaled crown on it, think of a blueberry. It has that little crown on top. If you see that little 5-petaled papery crown on top, that's the calyx of the flower. So it was like basically the green structure that's right underneath the flower that kind of holds the petals up. That becomes the top of the fruit. And if you see that 5-petaled calyx on a fruit, that means it's in the rose family and it's going to be safe for consumption. It doesn't mean it's going to taste good necessarily, it just means it won't kill you. In the case of hawthorns, generally speaking in the United States, most of the hawthorns you're going to find are not going to be like food grade varieties. You can still eat them. You can kind of treat them like apples. They're very similar to an apple. They're kind of mealy, almost like a pear, and they have like a floral, kind of like a, have you ever had rose hips? They taste kind of like rose hips and apple. But they make jams and jellies and stuff like that out of them. In Asia, if you go to like an Asian or a European market, sometimes you can find like the really big ones that are grown for food, and those are more like edible out of hand, where you wouldn't have to cook them or whatever. But in Asia, hawthorn is like a really common fruit flavor.
Oh.
Like here we have, like if you get a box of Mike and Ike's, it's going to be cherry, orange, lemon, lime, you know. But there you might get like guava and lychee and hawthorn flavor. Hawthorn's
cool.
kind of like
Candy?
their green apple flavor.
Oh, cool.
And hawthorns are also supposed to be really good for diabetics and stuff as well.
Okay.
Regulating blood sugar. Yeah.
It does seem like a lot of things you could forage are good for diabetics or blood pressure related things.
Yeah. We have a black nightshade down here, but we also have these little tiny mushrooms down here too. What are they? What are you, mushrooms? I don't know what kind of mushrooms these are. It's these little tiny guys, but they're cute.
A lot of those around.
But this is the black nightshade I was telling you
I
about
do have
earlier.
some of that growing actually at
And
home.
yeah, and if you find it growing in your garden, let it go because it's going to produce some really tasty little berries. You can't eat the berries when they're green, but when they're black and shiny and really, really dark purple, they're edible and they're good. There is a hole from a cicada right there. It's making all that noise in the trees. But let's talk about the mulberry. Mulberries,
Okay.
of course, are edible, and all mulberries are edible. Now, there is a native species of mulberry, but you'll almost never see it. I don't think I've ever seen it outside of a botanic garden.
Oh, really?
Most of the mulberry you see, the ones that the
They're
birds...
invasive, right?
Yeah, the ones the birds poop out all over your car and everything.
Yeah.
Those are the invasive white mulberry.
Okay.
And white mulberry is actually called white mulberry because about 5 to 10% of the actual fruit will be white when it's ripe. And sometimes you'll find white mulberries, and they taste mostly sugary. Sometimes they can just be real watery and taste like nothing. But they're like, if you've ever had the black mulberry or the dark ones, where they're kind of like sweet and tart like a blackberry, the white ones are just like all sweet, no tart. Sometimes
Birds
you can
love
find hybrids in between the two, but anyway, that's why they're called white mulberries. But so you can eat the fruit and you can make jams, jellies, all that good stuff out of them. But also the leaves can be turned into like a matcha powder. And also, if you have any kind of pet that eats leafy greens, like a guinea pig or a tortoise or a iguana or goats or anything like that, you can feed them mulberries, and they're really nutritious. Very high in calcium, and they're free, and they're invasive. Let's talk about, we have plantain right there, plantago. Plantain is probably one of those plants that no matter where I do a tour, I always try to talk about it because it is probably the most useful plant for anyone just walking around through daily life. Plantain is a common plant. If you go and Google plantain or plantago right now, you will see the plant and you'll be like, I know that plant, I've seen it. If you've ever sat on a lawn when you were a kid at a picnic or something like that, this is the plant you would pull the seeds off of it and you'd play with this. If you break the stems, the veins pull out of the leaf like celery string and stuff. But this is probably one of the most amazing plants that we have in the Chicago area and throughout the Midwest, and pretty much all throughout the United States there's some species of plantain that grows. We have a few different species here. We have obviously the American wideleaf plantain, which is what we're looking at right here, and then there's also the ribwort plantain with the longer leaf. Edible. The seeds can be used kind of like basil or chia seeds, where they actually will gelatinize when you soak them, and you can use them as a replacement binder in vegan recipes for eggs.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
That kind of thing. Then the plant itself can also be used as an okra-like thickener for soups and stews. But the best part about it is the medicinal properties. When you mash up the leaf, turn it into a poultice, it's like the best cure for any sort of skin ailment you might have. Particularly bee stings and wasp stings. If you get stung by a wasp or a bee, find yourself some plantain, mush it up, stick it on there, put a Band-Aid on it, and like in 2 minutes, it's like nothing happened.
Yeah, if you have water, pour some water over it, chew it up, make
Yeah.
a poultice, and it cools it immediately, like a mosquito bite.
It's intense.
Might use some of that soon.
And it works for like eczema, psoriasis, sunburn, like it's like a miracle cure. And it's like, I always tell people, make sure to teach your kids about this plant because it's one of those things, if they're on the playground with their friends and somebody gets stung by a bee or something like that, like this is, I was walking on a nature trail a couple of years ago and there was a bunch of kids that were crying up ahead and their grandparents were trying to calm them down. They had just run into a nest of yellow jackets and they all got stung like 3 or 4 times each. So I ran and got some plantain and I'm like, here, mash this up and put it on them. And like within a couple minutes, they were all cool. And calmed
Oh
down.
man, that's amazing.
It's like
It's
a
crazy.
foraging superhero.
That's what I say, forager to the rescue.
Yeah.
Let us talk about
I think also
Did you say lettuce?
here. Yeah, Here's the ribwort plantain right next to the other plantain.
Oh,
That's the
you know what? I don't
Longleaf
really know
plantain.
that one so much.
Let's talk about clovers, because clovers are another 90% rural plant. All clovers are edible to humans anyway. There's some that are toxic to wildlife and livestock,
That's right.
but generally, clovers are safe for humans, anything in the clover family. And clovers are pretty easy to recognize. Of course, we probably all spent time on the lawn when we were kids looking for the 4-leaf clovers. So you know what clovers look like. 3 leaves, typically, sometimes 4 leaves, sometimes 5 leaves. But typically 3 leaves, and they're going to be round, generally speaking. The leaves are going to be rounded or oval in shape, which is unlike the wood sorrel, which has the heart-shaped leaves, which is a shamrock. But clovers are different than a shamrock, even though they're closely related. They're both edible, though, so you don't really have to worry about screwing it up. But clovers, of course, have these pom-pom-like flowers, and those flowers are the edible part of the clover. You could eat the leaves, but generally speaking, the leaves of clovers are really hard for humans to digest, so they really don't have much nutritional value there. Unless you're grinding them or powdering them in a smoothie or something like that, they're not really going to have much nutritional value. But the flowers are very digestible. The flowers are also related to legumes. So the plant is related to legumes, so the flowers are actually up to 23% protein. And
Should we eat one?
some people, when they are on like the Appalachian Trail or like doing long-term hiking or camping, they will collect clover flowers and dry them out and add them to their MREs or their pancake batters to help boost the nutritional content. But yes, you can eat them.
All right.
And
I'm
the
gonna
nice,
eat one.
the thing is that the structure of the
Do you wanna
flower
wash
is
it
you can
first?
pull
Wash it?
Yes.
you can pull the
That was the
petals
one
Why are you gonna
off.
wash it off?
With our waters.
When you pull the petals off, they kind of become sprinkles as individual petals, so they look really pretty on a plate too.
Oh, they really do.
Oh.
They're really beautiful. All right, let's take a bite, Stephanie.
Okay.
If you
Oh,
do,
actually, that is straight up delightful.
yeah.
It's nice. It's very mild.
I'm going to finish
Yeah.
mine off. I'm
Are you
7/8
gonna eat
there.
the stem?
I'm really into that flower.
If you do want to try my cooking, come to one of my Forage and Feast events.
Okay.
'Cause I will feed the hell out of you.
Everybody, all that info is in the summary of this episode.
Yes.
You can find him and book.
Eattheneighborhood.com or oddproduce.com.
Okay.
We'll get you to all that.
I feel like we don't really need to do a plant reveal because
Yeah,
you
I
just
think we
revealed like
revealed it.
10 plants
You've
to
revealed
us
our world.
already.
Yeah, around us
Yeah.
right now.
pretty good times.
Yeah.
Dave, thank you so much for fitting us in because we know
Yeah,
you have
no
such a really busy schedule.
I am doing a lot of stuff.
You are a man about town.
I am.
Thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge and
Thank you
walking
for
around this 20-foot square area with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
We hope
yeah, it's-
everybody has learned a lot and gets out there and contacts you if they want more information.
Yeah, and my
Yeah.
tours are only like $35-$40 a person for just a regular walking tour, so it's completely affordable. And I always make exceptions for people. If you're having a hard time or struggling or whatever, you know, I'm always willing to make a deal with people. So
That's
Awesome.
important.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What
No
a
problem.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.